60s at MIT in a poetry workshop. So we have a long history together. And also I wanted to thank James Frazier. I can't say enough glowing things about him. I just met him, but he's phenomenal. And he's carrying on the tradition of one of the great bookstores of the United States, Grolier Poetry Bookshop. Everyone who comes to Cambridge has to come to this bookshop and buy books. It's the most incredible place. And so I just wanted to say a few words about Slapering Hol Press. We're talking a little bit about age here. So I wanted to mention that Slapering Hol Press, even though it seems young to me, is the oldest currently existing chapbook press in the United States. The primary mission of the press has always been to advance the national and international conversation of poetry and poetics, and to provide opportunities for emerging poets. SHP's chapbooks spotlight promising new poets whose work has not appeared in book form and foster collaborations with newcomers and established authors. Every year since 1990, SHP has held a chapbook contest for poets who have not previously published in book form. The deadline is June 15th. Please take a look at the Slapering Hol Press, the small press imprint of the Hudson Valley Writers Center on the website writerscenter.org. SHP co-editors also publish conversation chapbooks, which include the work of a master woman poet who chooses an emerging poet in the same collection with an interview at the end. This year we published Dorian Locks, who chose Leila Chatti. Ellen Bass is next year's conversation poet. We have also published the work of other master poets, including Elizabeth Alexander, who we chose before Barack Obama. He was waiting to see who we would choose before he decided who his inaugural poet would be. Toy Daracot, Kimiko Han, Kim Adonisio, Denise Duhamel, and many other amazing women who have chosen equally as amazing emerging poets to appear with them. The first box set that SHP created was the inaugural 7 New Generation African Poets, and it was edited by Kwame Dawes and Chris Abani in collaboration with the African Poetry Book Fund, Prairie Schooner, and the Poetry Foundation. This year, SHP produced a 3 chapbook box set, including 3 winners of Slapering Hol Press chapbook contest, 2 of whom are here tonight. The Scottish Cafe was Susana H. Case. They became stars by Liz Marlowe, and Ubisode by Aaron Caycedo-Kimura, and you'll be able to hear more from Susana and Aaron tonight, I'm so happy to say. These chapbooks focus on life before, during, and after the Second World War to highlight the horrors of war with lyrical resonance and sadly growing continuing relevance. So I hope everyone will take a look at some of our chapbooks after the reading or go to the website writerscenter.org. Thank you very much.
The chapbooks are really gorgeously produced, so I really highly recommend them. So we were having a little argument at dinner because they're the oldest chapbook press. As the editor of Hanging Loose, we're the oldest independent press, literary press in America, 56 years in running. I was only 12 when I started, so I was precocious. Our first reader is Susana H. Case. Susana is the author of 8 books of poetry, most recently The Damage Done from Broadstone, Dead Shark on the N Train, also from Broadstone, which won a Pinnacle Award for the best poetry book and a New York City Big Book Award, distinguished favorite, and was a finalist for the Eric Hoffer Book Award. She's also the author of 5 chapbooks. Her first collection, The Scottish Cafe, which Margo mentioned from Slapering Hol Press, was released in a dual language English-Polish version. Kawiarni, I'm not gonna embarrass myself with my poor Polish. Okay. Her poetry is translated into Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese, and Polish, of course. Her poems appear very widely in places such as CALYX, Catamaran, the Cortland Review, Portland Review, Rattle, RHINO, and Upstreet. She's recently retired a professor from the New York Institute of Technology in New York City, where she taught for 38 years. She's a co-editor of Slapering Hol Press. Susana.
Thank you, Mark. Is this, you're hearing me on this? Good. So, yeah, the Scottish Cafe has been mentioned several times already. This is the chapbook, which was my introduction to Slapering Hol Press. And I thought I'd just read one selection from that. This is a collection of poems set in pre-war Poland as World War II is starting to approach. And this, the personnel in the poems are a bunch of mathematicians who are still very foundational in mathematics, even now, even today. And this poem is called Raisins. Orlich is a regular at the Scottish Cafe. His apartment in Lvov is really small, and even his Orlich spaces do not leave him enough room at home, which his wife has filled with dozens of needlepoint pillows. So he creates function spaces at the cafe full of his favorite cheese, pashka, from which he picks out the raisins which irritate him and uses them to assemble the 14 problems he contributes to the Scottish book. His teacher Steinhaus is not yet in trouble, not yet hiding from the Germans who are not yet on their way to Stalingrad. His teacher Bannock is not yet arrested for trafficking in German currency, none of it true. The mathematics is not yet diminishing, more than 25 mathematicians in Poland not yet dead, which leaves Orlich suspended for a delicious moment in time and space where the yeast and egg and farmer's cheese and sugar loaves still taste exceptionally sweet, carefully covered by the cafe cook to prevent burning. So largely tonight, I'm going to read from my latest book, The Damage Done, Broadstone. By coincidence, all three co-editors here are Broadstone Books publishers, and I want to give a shout out to Larry Moore, who I noticed is in the virtual audience. He's very good about attending his poets reading. So The Damage Done is a murder story in poetic form. And it takes place in the late 60s, early 70s, when the FBI was a different animal than it is right now. And at that point in time, the FBI was still carrying out what were called COINTELPRO operations, in which supporters of radical groups and radical organizations and progressive organizations were targeted and harassed. So the protagonist in this book is a woman named Janie, who is a contributor to progressive causes, and she is dead at the beginning of the collection. This is woman recumbent in car. A car sits in violation of parking rules, the only car on the street. In it, blonde hair peeks out from a blanket on the seat. It's early in the morning, a tow truck operator new on the job. He's back from vacation, wonders if he should have remained on the beach, the blanket reminding him of scratchy sand, pina coladas, his newly minted wife. Every day, people come back from vacation to tragedies. Picture him sitting in his truck, waiting for the police as he plays cuts from Blonde on Blonde. Every day, people listen to these songs. He's a Dylan classic rock appassionato, wonders if the dead woman is a debutante like Edie Sedgwick in Just Like a Woman. He wonders if his new wife is full of feminine tricks. One of the characters in this collection is a New York City detective, and this is called The Detective Can't Sleep. If he smokes too much, maybe he won't think too much. So here are the Marlboros, and there are the backup Marlboros. And here are his teeth, a yellowing, broken up roadway of too many cigarettes. He's thinking about a pigeon grazing nearby, a cooing ruin, how every trash pigeon in New York City is descended from a banded homing pigeon that didn't go straight home. Nights he tosses, sweats. It's the D-ball, steroid for weightlifting. It's the rust-colored stain on his bedroom ceiling that looks like a fish, one with no insides, like the drawing a child makes. But his son is bored of drawing, his woman not looking at him fondly. It's the dead that keep him awake, and a crowd hovering like today at a double feature of the gorgeous grotesque, noticing something not right. So a lot of Janie's stories, since she's dead at the beginning, is told in flashback. This is one of them, flashback bedroom. Blame the walls and doors. They entice the husband to punch them. 5 stitches on his right wrist just last summer. Inanimate objects only. He says he is a man of peace. His familiar rage, it doesn't cease with 3 days in a row of humid heat, 90 degrees. And how come Janie wasn't in her room in Taos after the shoot? Like an asymptote, she's gotten so close to perfection, can taste how close, like she tastes the black coffee, water, sugarless gum, all she's had for days, so tired of being shown off like an expensive watch. Her precision surgery on her food, he criticizes her microscopic cutting, and how did her ass blow up overnight? The mirror is relentless. The water, she drinks too much of it, needs to do more calisthenics, the weight on the scales unchanging. The food she pretends to eat, sometimes she has to put a small bit in her mouth, exercise the gain away or purge, but anything is better than throwing up again. The rules for when he can look at her, only when dressed or when the lights are out, darkness and cover. Her ribs, where downy pale white fur has begun to grow, though she is freezing all the time. The room of ecru walls, the color picked from over 30 variations of beige. For weeks, samples were shuffled and placed on their bed while she tried to decide. His only comment, that nothing was getting laid on their bed lately, except the paint swatches. Blame the husband. He likes them thin and young. This is another flashback, family of origin, family of choice. Sometimes our families of origin aren't so great, so we pick others. Right. Janie and her lover in a rental car, not too flashy, a quiet Ford, running guns to Newark. They take in side roads around the turnpike, stop driving to make out. Mouth upon mouth, she knows this is a sweet man, tries not to find kissing difficult, tries not to think about the time her mother, wrapped in grief, made her kiss grandfather's corpse. That stern family she came from, grim, like in Hill and Adamson sepia photographs of fishermen and their wives, somber in striped cloth skirts. She was 11, and in the casket, he was, for once, not drunk. So at one point, the detective goes to visit his brother, who has been horribly injured in Vietnam. And this is a free fire zone, means anything that moves can be shot. Talking again about how green everything was, the fire and smoke, the mountains and silence, the jungle, which he never gets past when he tries to tell the story of how anything that moves is shot and he was shot. And here he is now in their parents' home instead of a rat's ass chronic care veterans facility. Has been like this for years, body broken, shrapnel still in his head, trying to talk to his older brother, the detective, who's wondering if the kid wants to die because someone now will have to do it for him. And all he had needed to do was stall a little bit. The war was winding down, or be some other place on some other hill, not that hill, where nothing will ever grow back, a monument to ill conception, instead of here now, crying again, some spittle on his lips. And I will read one more from this and then one final poem. So thank you all for being here. This is Everyone Wants Answers. He has his friend take a few Polaroids, wants to walk out of the police station looking the same way he looked going in. The one with bad teeth is too nice, surely just a ruse, and will damage him the worst. Then go to a bar and fill up with booze. Would he like a soda? His throat is dry. He won't give them the satisfaction of needing anything. Let's go over it again, fill in a few holes. He doesn't know a thing. They read him as rights. He's not sure what to say. A freebie legal aid hack won't do him any good. His sadness makes it hard to move. He's losing his fight, Mrs. Janey. This really isn't him anymore. He's barely listening. Political stuff, he hears a cop snarl, tries for bravado. Hey, when you're a Black man, just walking down the street is political stuff. His words fall flat. He isn't cooperative enough, the fat one says, for them to help. Let's go over it again. The fat cop crosses his arms. So Margo and I were co-edited a anthology of poems on Marilyn Monroe this past year called I Want to Be Loved by You. We have some copies near the front, but I'll read the 91 different poets, living and dead, incredible anthology. And I'm just going to end on my contribution, which is inspired, if you've seen the movie, by the movie Niagara. And this is called Atomic Blonde. A woman labeled a tramp in a tight dress in the first half of any 1953 movie is going to be dead by its second half, like in Niagara. Marilyn playing vampy Rose Loomis, passion kissing her lover behind a barrier to the falls. The water, a symbol of rutting life force, if ever there were one, is later strangled by her husband George in revenge. I had that husband too, who'd already tried to cut off my air at home, a pillow over my face. This wasn't a film, and I fought back. Why were we at Niagara on vacation? I'd left the lover in New York City to kiss and mess around with on my return. No intent to coax him into a killing by a waterfall. I wanted only to be pushed out, too indecisive by nature just to leave. But in this marriage, I always had to do the cleaning up. Not a femme fatale. I was more the Polly Cutler type, the one who takes a first aid kit on vacation to soothe all possible injuries. But my George Loomis didn't steal a boat and drop to his end over the falls. When we got home, I got the papers and he signed them. Thank you.
I think Susana and Margo, you should send a copy of the Marilyn Monroe anthology as a birthday present to Vladimir Putin. I know the Ukrainians just did that. So wonderful. Our next reader is Aaron Caycedo-Kimura, who I've just met. He's a writer and visual artist. He's got connections here in the Boston area. He is the author of two poetry collections, Ubusut, which won the 2020 Slapering Hol Press chapbook competition, and the full-length collection Common Grace, forthcoming from Beacon Press in the fall. So relatively soon. Oh, there it is. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's here. Yay. Congratulations. Wonderful. Wonderful. Great. Okay. His honors include a Robert Pinsky Globe Fellowship in Poetry, a St. Botolph Club Foundation Emerging Artists Award in Literature, and nominations for the Pushcart Prize, Best of the Net, and Best New Poets anthologies. His poems have appeared or are forthcoming in the Beloit Poetry Journal, RHINO, Upstreet, Verse, Daily, DMQ Review, Poet Lore, and Night Heron Barks. Night Heron Barks, yes. And elsewhere. Aaron earned his MFA across the river in the creative writing program at Boston University. And he is also the author and illustrator of Text, Don't Call, an illustrated guide to the introverted life. So, without further ado, congratulations on your new book.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. And thank you, everyone online, for tuning in. James, Grolier, thank you for having us. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to be sharing some poems with you from my new book, Common Grace. This book is divided into 3 sections. So I'm gonna read a few poems from each section. I'm gonna read 7 poems tonight. And the first one I'm going to read is the first poem in the book. And this will give you a little bit of information on my family background. It'll also probably date me. This poem is entitled Family Anthem. I walk into the garage from side door sunlight, ELO on my Walkman. My eyes dissolve the darkness, discover my parents locked in a slow dance embrace, whispering to each other like lovers. But my parents aren't lovers. They're Japanese. Never kiss, hold hands, say, I love you, not even to me. Once I asked Mom if she loved me, she replied, my mother and father never said it, but I knew they did. My parents hear my shuffle, separate like guilty teenagers. She escapes into the house, he into the Ford, opens the garage door. I fumble, forget what I was looking for, but all afternoon replay that dissonant chord. The next couple poems I'm going to read for you have to do with my art life. I'm also a painter, but you could read these poems also as Ars Poetica because they're very apropos to my poetry life as well. The next poem I'm going to read is entitled In the Studio. And if you follow me on social media, you'll know that yesterday I posted a painting, which is the painting I'm working on in this poem. In the studio, arranged on a table behind my easel, a red sake bottle, blue glass vase, an ochre bowl I bought for $1 at Goodwill. Joni Mitchell plays on my laptop. I slosh a number 5 flat brush in the wash container's cloudy turf, let it soak in the strainer, step away from the canvas 5 or 6 feet. Bowl's too flat. Some lighter touches in front will round it out. The background's kind of warm. A few strokes of blue-gray should cool it down, push it back. Joni sings California. After flying back to Santa Rosa when my father died, I returned home, met Tinica for coffee. She'd show my work if I didn't drip and spatter. For a while, I painted to please her, then canceled my show, let my brushes harden, my palette crust. Back at the easel, I grab a tube of ultramarine, squeeze in a dab on my palette, slather in some vermilion, ochre, titanium white. Joni takes me back to junior high. I lose myself in study hall, scribbling and sketching all over the book covers I made from brown paper bags. The next poem is a sonnet, a blank verse sonnet that I wrote for another artist. I met her when I was going to BU. She was a painter in the MFA program. And we participated in, I'm not sure what it's called, Annika, it's the poet.
The Artist Book Project.
The artist, thank you, the Artist Book Project. And we were paired together to create a book. The poets supplied the text and the artists created this book. It could look like this. I saw one that looked like shower curtains with the words painted on it. I've seen etched glass. My artist was a landscape artist, so she painted this long piece of paper, made it an accordion book and cut out the top and then wrote my poem on the bottom. She invited me to her studio and showed me her work and talked about her work. And she also talked a little bit about her life. So I took all that information and I wrote this sonnet for her for our project. But after writing this, I realized that it's really apropos to many creative people who seek a very unconventional creative life. Poet, painter, dancer, singer. And this poem is entitled North on Route 101 for A.H. She drives up the winding coast, 20 miles per hour in Pacific fog, like she's searching for a line, a la prima, with the worn bristles of a flat brush. In every twist, she focuses on the road, not the drop-offs. The fog dissipates, swatches of wild rye, reed grass, and sky spread across the windshield. Back on the other coast, dishes, pots, pans, a job, most of her clothes. Tonight, she'll sleep near the foot of Mount St. Helens, wake up to a sun eruption of Hansa yellow and cadmium orange. She'll sketch a stream tumbling toward her over a fallen cedar, a sprinkling of pastel dust in her lap. I'm going to move on to the next section, which is about my parents. My father died in 2011 and my mother passed away in 2015. This next poem is about my parents when they were newlyweds before my sister and I came along. And this poem is entitled The Hardest Part. The fire truck siren downstairs raided the air of my mother's dreams. She'd scream in her sleep, my father told me, even after we married. More than a decade past the Second World War, for him, American concentration camps, for her, the firebombing of Tokyo. They moved into a San Francisco apartment that rented to Japs, a one-bedroom walk-up above the Post Street fire station. They painted their bathroom black. It was in style then. Shelved books, unboxed a new rice cooker, watered a shrub of Japanese maple potted for their future garden. When the station got a call in the middle of the night, the rumble of the overhead door crumbled into the wreck that was once her home. Swirling lights flashed ancient trees into flames through the thin silk curtains of her eyelids. No warning, no drill, no cover. My father stilled her body, his broad hand on her shoulder or hip, as they lay in the dark, listening to the slowing of her breath. The hardest part of those nights, he said, was waiting, sometimes hours, for the truck and the men to come back. My next poem is a pantoum, and it's entitled Burial. I returned my father's body to the earth, cremated as he instructed in a letter. No funeral, no obituary in the newspaper. Those who needed to know were told. I had his remains cremated as he instructed, scattered his ashes in Bodega Bay. Those who needed to know were told that I waited until my mother passed to scatter his ashes in Bodega Bay, past the jetty where we used to fish. I waited until my mother passed, poured out their dust together, past the jetty where we used to fish, from the deck of the Miss Anita, seagulls calling overhead. I poured out their dust together with a handful of Uncle George from the deck of the Miss Anita, seagulls calling overhead. No funeral, no obituary in the newspaper. With a handful of Uncle George, I returned their bodies to the earth. And I will finish with two poems from the third and final section. And this is another sonnet, a loose sonnet, or a blank verse sonnet. It's entitled Staircase. My staircase has 13 steps, oak like the floors, the handrails painted white. Sometimes the child I never had walks down in onesie pajamas, pink hearts, rubberized feet, counting the 13 steps out loud. At other times, she's a teen in a burgundy prom dress, reasonably priced. That's her grandmother's pink pearl necklace. As she descends in heels, she counts, especially that last step, which blends into the floor where the pale green rug creeps toward the window. If daydreaming like this, you lose the count, you will find your coffee splattered on the wall and you on the floor yelling, "I'm okay," to an empty house. Thank you everyone for coming tonight, and thank you everyone online for tuning in. James, thank you again for having us. I have one more poem, and this poem, it's the last poem in the book, and it's entitled Gutter Trees. Louisa and I raised the ladder, walking it up rung by rung, prop it against the second story. After a breath, balance it back, heave the extension by hand, 4 hands to be exact. Rung locks click into place with each push. The rope and pulley don't work. In seasons of dirt and leaves mulched into the gutter, pigweeds have grown, or maybe hickory seedlings standing a foot or so above the roof's edge. Before moving here, We were blown across 2 countries, 3 states, 6 cities, dug in wherever we landed. If it weren't for the neighbors, we'd let our gutter trees linger, our hanging garden of Bloomfield, 9th wonder of the world. Thank you.
I was just persuaded by my wife's cousin not to try to clean my gutters. In the second floor, which you perfectly described. I was here not long ago with introducing one of my new poetry interns to the Grolier, which I described to him as the temple of poetry. And is it the 90th anniversary now this year? 95th. Wow. So yes, perhaps the only or one of the few only poetry bookstores left in America. So yeah, and Margo and I were talking about when we first visited here when Gordon Kearney was the founder, was still around. And now a lot of you're one of the rare women that I know who felt comfortable coming into this all male bastion in those days under Gordon. So that was a long time ago, 1969. So Margo Taft Stever has 3 full poetry collections: End of Horses, Broadstone; Cracked Piano, CavanKerry, which was shortlisted and honorable mention for the 2021 Eric Hoffer Grand Prize; and Frozen Spring, 2002 Midlist Press First Series Award for Poetry. The latest of 4 chapbooks is Ghost Moves from Kattywompus Press in 2019. Her poems have appeared in literary magazines, including Verse Daily, Plant Human Quarterly, Cincinnati Review, Rattle, Upstreet, Salamander, West Branch, Poet Lore, Blackbird, Poem a Day, Academy of American Poets, and Prairie Schooner. She's currently an adjunct assistant professor in bioethics, which you have to explain to me how that came about someday, department at the School of Medicine at Case Western Reserve University. Margo also teaches a poetry workshop at Children's Village, a residential school for at-risk children and adolescents. She's founder, as we said earlier, of the Hudson Valley Writers Center and of Slapering Hol Press. So Margo.
Thank you, Mark. And who is, of course, a great editor of Hanging Loose, great poet and great memoirist, written a book about Denise Levertov that everyone should read. Recently came out. I hope you all know about it. And thanks again, James Frazier. You're amazing. And of course, thanks for the Slapering Hol Press poets, Susana H. Case and Eric Caycedo-Kimura, for being here, and the co-editors, Susana H. Case, Mervyn Taylor, who will read next to me. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks everyone for being here. We know that the Supreme Court decision to take away abortion rights could be a foreshadowing of their decimation of other hard-fought human rights. This year, they also ruled on a case that will weaken EPA's already feeble response to climate change. Many of my poems in The End of Horses, published by Broadstone Books, are about the sixth extinction, and some are about the fragility of the human family. And I wanted to read a few of those. Galloping Double Bareback. Down sandy edges of paved country roads without helmets, bareback, the sisters clung to each other, to the horse, to the tree-lined ways that snaked around and through, as if going somewhere were not the goal. Their bodies twinned, hair wind-whipped, the triple rocking of legs pounding, the leaping beat of hooves. The girls struggled to stay the horse, rippling through them like storm. Wind-battered trees that framed the hush of birds silenced by their galloping, the muddy paths, the mourning dove, soft-eyed windows of distant houses. Head down, the quieted horse plowed through grasses, his massive form sleek, willowy. So much did they long for the beast's velvet nose to be buried in their arms. And Susana mentioned that she and I edited the book, I Want to Be Loved by You, Poems on Marilyn Monroe. And I wanted to read my poem from that collection, Beauty Parlor. A pedicurist clips a hangnail from a client's big toe while Monsieur Mark, cultivated Belgian, whittles away at her hair. He praises her Botox, only 5 injections, her face now full and taut. In 1905, blondined hair was scandalous. Over a century later, I'm trying to make mine as platinum as possible, bleach out and blend with the gray growing in, cut down on visits and cost. While I stamp out signs of age, my stylist, a striking woman who was recently a man, talks about her boyfriend in a soft masculine voice. On a corner below at Lex and 28th, we observe a woman, blonde hair straggling, like Marilyn's on her way down. But this woman's roots have grown in, 3 inches of black. What a shame, exclaims Monsieur Mark. The woman stumbles, gropes the trash can, body bent over off balance. Oddly leaning, she careens, wobbles into the street. Bus brakes screech, she hawks green phlegm. Must be on crack, says one client. Mr. Mark wonders, why doesn't she do something with her hair? One of my neighbors, who is an environmental lawyer and professor, once said to me that if we do not take climate change seriously and do things and try to prevent it now, only a few humans will be living in the future in northern Canada. And I want to read my poem, Treehouse. Treehouse. Something about roots, bone-like, tenacious, that grip the moving ground. The branches like umbrellas bent back and broken by the storm. The leaves veined references to hands and the sound of the wind's wild working against the leaves. The boy collected the branches and stored them under his bed. Something about the tree seeped into his dreams, the trunk a hallway, the branches outlined rooms, and his family finding shelter in the boughs, listening to the sound language of leaves. He did not see a garden, apples, or any fires. Everyone huddled together to keep warm. One of my sons and his wife run an organic farm in East Concord, New Hampshire, and for many years, because of warmer winters, ticks have multiplied at an astronomical rate, and the moose is now dying out in New Hampshire and Maine. Ghost moose. Searching for moose, the children run down to the river, calling the already gone, the forgotten, to wallow in stench, the smell of skunk weeds. Moose calves become ghosts, rubbing fur, skin, scraping ticks off on tree bark. In mild winters, ticks multiply and multiply, occupy moose calves, killing them slowly. Their mothers witness starvation from blood loss. Moose calves resemble ghosts, tearing fur, skin. Calves waste away, wasted bodies frighten the forest floor. Foresters call April the month of death. And on the same vein, I wanted to read a poem in honor of the 1,100 mutilated dolphins that washed up on the shore of France a couple of years ago. They are mutilated by their attempt to get to the surface to breathe. Trawlers now work in pairs and drag a net between them. And as a result, the European dolphin is on its way to extinction. Ballad of the Dolphin. Ancient Greeks said they should be treated as humans. Their sailors would not kill dolphins. How I have thought of you caught in the fishermen's nets. They would set them to trap you to catch the tuna that swam under your schools. How the fishermen hung you still alive upside down. Your cries brought others. Fishermen grabbed you by your tail, strung you and turned you head down in water, tied you to lifting hooks and dragged you to the docks. If any of you were still alive when they slung you on cement, they stabbed you. How last survivors churned the water red, leaping in panic, waiting to die. In a good catch, it took them 3 days to kill all of you. How mothers whose calves were entangled could not lift them to the surface. They listened to their helpless underwater clicks and sighs. How often I remember the whale skippers who would radio the location of hundreds of you, allowing tuna fishermen to track down your entire pod. Their nets deep, foaming, wide, so that hundreds could fit inside. How they used underwater sound to confuse and drive you down. How many of you drowned? Fishermen did not want to compete with you, but killing you was not enough. How they used the screams of several to slaughter more. How one of you hangs from the prow, still alive, calling, calling. And sadly, that has not ended. It has continued and continues to this day. And all my proceeds from this book will go to the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, which tries to do something about this kind of depravity. And I wanted to read a couple of poems from my previous collection, Crack Piano, which was published in 2019 by CavanKerry Press. And the first is set in Sleepy Hollow, New York, where I live, which is the Halloween capital of the country. So I had to read it. And it's titled Raven's Rock, Sleepy Hollow, New York. Ichabod, the headless horseman, rolling hills, the highlands, villages where men tarry at the bars, Sleepy Town, Beekman Town, Tarrytown. But who has heard of 3 young women who lost their way in separate incidents many years apart, who took shelter at Raven's Rock and perished in the night? Who knows why they walked the tree-frozen road, their fingers burnt with cold? 3 figures in white, their ethereal, shrill pitch unbearable, gesturing as if the swirling snow, eddies of snow, snow rivers could be human, as if something totally frozen could be alive. What is a raven but a bird, a ghost but a raven bird, and the ghosts of 3 women ravenous, waiting at Raven's Rock for a single man to pass by? And did they vent their rage for ages of wrongness, for the unrequited, the undone love, love forced upon them, jealous love, hardening them, these women by the Hudson, now still, now irrevocably gone? And I just wanted to read one more poem, which is about the central theme of the collection, the thin line between what is considered sane and insane. In the latter half of the 19th century, superintendents at insane asylums often held balls considered therapeutic for their patients. Spectators were sometimes invited. The Lunatic Ball, After Dance in a Madhouse by George Bellows, who lived from 1882 to 1925. Furious dancing gives way to screams. 5 men stare ghoulish at the wall. This is a lunatic ball. The best student Yale had ever seen. 3 months after graduation, typhoid, brains swelled inside his skull. They dosed out calomel. 5 ghosts appeared in a mercury dream, headaches unbearable. This is the lunatic ball. Married 1 year, baby the next, his wife filed for release. The medical textbooks he gleaned, futile, endless stall. A woman names her baby doll Christ, lurches, leans, a building in an earthquake, then she crawls. This is a lunatic ball. One man plays a flute, calls himself Faunus, another uses an invisible latrine. Attendants haul out a wild man in a straitjacket on a wooden beam. A woman growls like a bear. This is a lunatic ball. Behind a glass wall, well-dressed spectators riveted sit amused. Looking at them looking, the patients know they are through. Spectacled men sport greatcoats and laced up women make jokes in the shimmering hall. And I just wanted to read a couple of more short poems from my latest collection, End of Horses. According to Bill McKibben, in his October 6th review of 3 books on climate change titled Where We Will Live in the New York Review of Books, quote, the UN's High Commissioner on Refugees reported in late May that the world, for the first time in recorded history, had 100 million forcibly displaced people this year. The International Organization for Migration has predicted that we could see 1.5 billion people forced from their homes by 2050. And by 2070, as many as 3 billion people could be living in intolerable heat. So I wanted to read my title poem. A lot of people have asked me why it's titled End of Horses, and I hope this might explain it. End of Horses. I write to you from the end of the time zone. You must realize that nothing survived after the horses were slaughtered. We sleep below the hollow, burned out stars. We look into dust bowls, searching for horses. When you walk in the country, you will be shocked to meet substantial masses on the road. We do not know whom to blame or where the horses were driven, who slaughtered them or for what purpose. Had the horses slept under the linden trees? The generals and engineers pucker and snore on the veranda. The last poem is the last poem in the book. Ocean birds. Jealous is the night, the feckless night, coming over us as water into sea. The forceful day's geography turned black. Your body is the sea I float upon, your skin becomes the waves. Nothing will ever bring you here to me. Nothing will ever call you back. Thank you.
And last but not least is Mervyn Taylor, originally from Trinidad, and he's been a Brooklyn resident for many years. And we discovered a number of New York and Brooklyn poets we know in common over dinner today. He's taught at the Bronx Community College, the New School, in the New York City public school system. Retired from teaching, he's the author of 7 full-length books of poetry, including No Back Door, Voices Carry, and the recent Country of Warm Snow, all by Shearsman Books. The Poetry Book Society recommendation, the last, was longlisted for the 2021 OCM Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature in the poetry category. A chapbook, News of the Living, Corona Poems, was published by Broadstone Books. Taylor can be heard, and you have a new book coming in the spring, you said, from Broadstone? Broadstone. Tell people the title when you come up. Yeah. Okay, and he can be heard reading. He's got a CD called Road Clear, in which he recites poems accompanied by the renowned bassist David Williams.
best of things happen in small spaces. It's the truth. Yeah, definitely. Margo, thanks for convincing me that this was a good idea. You know, I'm usually resistant to things, but here we are. Okay. I thought I would read the title poem from News of the Living. They tell me that people are tired of hearing Corona poems now, but looking around this room, I'm reminded that it's still very much with us, right? News of the Living, which is the title poem. I started to call this book The Dying Season. And I said, well, everybody knows it's the dying season, right? So let's make it News of the Living. News of the Living. Where's Lita that I may greet and hug her? Her arms, her face white with flour. She's been baking all day to help her son with the business. In the shop, flourishing. The autistic grandchild, is he doing well? I can't think whom else to inquire about except Dudley, who long ago retired into himself, drew the covers up to his chin as if he knew this day was coming. Ah, Lita, I know you're holding them all above water while the floodgates of this virus open all around us. You'll convert your house into boat, kitchen into galley, beds into rafts, blowing into the sails till your air runs out, and then fanning with your apron, fanning. That's about a lady I've known for a long time who was one of those early immigrants from Trinidad and who, with very little, did so well for herself. And that's the strength of the immigrant, I think. I wanted to also read the title From Country of Warm Snow, because somebody asked me, what do you mean by country of warm snow? I'm realizing now that I can see better without my Country of Warm Snow for Courtney. You stopped by, feet swollen from sleeping, sitting up. When I think of how we entered this city, separating through the streets in the months after, I picture the state you had gotten lost in, east, west, perhaps one of the dry ones like Nevada. Never afraid to dream, your idea of America remained what we had seen in the movies, fields where men keep rounding the bases, cheeks red with October chill. That first winter you said the snow looked warm, and now someone's promised you a cot in a basement. You grin with delight as if the offer has redeemed whatever wrong was done to you. Country of warm snow. It's funny, right? I suspect that the average immigrant coming from the Caribbean or any warm country, that your first wish would be that snow would be warm. You say, oh, the snow is so pretty. And then you find out what the truth of it is, right? Stutter step. Old men don't stagger because they're drunk. Their legs just don't go where they want them to. They look distracted because they're thinking about some things they could have done differently. Old men are fools for wondering how they got here when they started out for somewhere else, even had a map. They retrace their steps and stand at the crossroads looking this way and that. They almost get run over, not by young punks, but by other old men whose shirts are buttoned the wrong way, who slap away the wife's hand, insisting they can do it themselves. They call a friend, and when he no longer answers, they cradle the phone quietly, emitting one of those long sighs that only a lover from the very distant past can hear. She who died in the back of a taxi cab, or suddenly on a cruise, somewhere out in the middle of the Atlantic when their song was playing. Old men do the stutter step, a kind of dance that comes naturally to them, a hesitation, while the feet try to figure the next move. No matter how long you live, life is still full of surprises. And when you're young, nobody tells you what it's going to be like later on, but you find out, and it's a surprise after surprise. Bureau of Sewers for Keith Louie. The bus I take after visiting my friend at the Four Seasons nursing home is packed with school kids. The sign on a building we pass reads Bureau of Sewers. I imagine what's inside. Rows of desks, clerks poring over plans of the city's underbelly, canals down to the sea. It's a windowless building, the type to encourage few visitors. It makes me think of my friend sleeping stiffly upright in the chair the nurse pushes him in, only his eyelids fluttering when I call his name, the band on his arm warning, likely to fall. His neck seems strained, like he was listening to something, a bird perhaps, trilling in the tropics where we come from, as did almost all the attendants in the home who rub his shoulders every time they pass. Next visit, I'll tell him about the bureau and the noisy kids, and he'll remind me how shit backs up on given days. That last line is still killing me. I don't like to mention words like shit in poem, and I have a hard time reading it every time. So maybe you have some suggestions of what else I can. You can't say how feces backs up. That does. But a blur for Zadie. Zadie's my granddaughter, who's doing great things. She's playing the piano like nobody's business. But she's also running, which is the incredible thing. As a toddler, my granddaughter had trouble with balance, wobbled along a ledge while her therapist held her hand. We lost every race we ran with her brother, even with the head start he allowed us, trailed him into the building lobby, he and the super high-fiving each other. Now her dad's email says she placed first in her high school 400 meter, third in the long jump. I'm showing everyone her video. Her long legs a blur as I rewind and point. That's her in the blue. No, the other blue. Her braid behind like a bird in the current of air, like the arm that once held her steady as she struggled to put one foot in front of the other. That foot now crossing the finish first. Gum. In American war movies, chewing gum was a sign of staying calm while bullets whizzed overhead, a sign of the kindness of GIs as they passed out sticks of it to wide-eyed kids. In Minnesota, while a policeman kneeled on George Floyd's neck, one of the officers kept chewing as Floyd called to his deceased mother that he was dying. And in Chicago, a Black woman just out of the shower stood in the center of her living room, shivering, the broken front door letting in light, cops in a ring around her as she screamed, "Wrong house, you got the wrong house." And though the sergeant used his jacket to try and cover her, she'll never forget their faces, especially the one who never stopped smiling and chewing gum, who never once looked away. So these poems are a motley group, some old, some new, and some of them from the new book. And the reason why I didn't give you a title is because it still goes back and forth, but up to this point, it's called The Last Train. And I will mention that my original title was A Common Place, but certain people here who shall remain nameless didn't like that title. So Susana, I'm sorry. War Days. days of rations and shortages with the yellow ration card of lines outside Allianz shop, on the door the phrase, Kilroy was here. There were rumors of subs in the sea all around, of enemies embedded with us on this island, far from any bombing. It was not our war. Still, my aunt sang, buy a Flanders puppy, save it for a souvenir. When they ask who you're buying it for, say Trinidadian boys who died in the war. And we remained as quiet as a blackout in Britain. No carnival for years, only the rediffusion crackling with news and sailors in town searching for the harbor. While my father, responsible for keeping the trains moving, on the way to work, kissed my mother as I insisted, on the lips, Dad, on the lips. That's a true story. Okay. Watching TV at the laundromat. Killing time till the doctor opens. I sit next to the guy who says, wow, Judge Judy's got new hair. A Mexican woman folds and chats on the phone, her baby on the counter playing with a teddy bear. I can't believe it's been 4 years since The Revenant, since you and I sat mesmerized by DiCaprio taking great gulps of river water, his heart holding all that and more. The doctor should be in soon, her first name, Mañana, like a promise. I'll be okay, like the judge's hairstyle, like border children, like people who survived the massacre, like the guy telling the TV he never went to his prom. I wonder why. And another laundromat poem. I live right on Prospect Park corner, and across the street is my laundromat, which is so convenient, which is why I haven't moved in over 40 years. But anyway, but the strangest thing happened, right? A West Indian guy, I think he's from Grenada, set up his books, selling books like for $1 or $2 right outside the laundromat. So my laundromat became not just a laundromat, right here. And it, anyway, you'll get it from the poem. Making plans. There's nothing today. No wind, no ice spreading to cover the lake, no letter arriving. There's only time, 10, then 11. A hasty look out the window at the way the weather behaves or doesn't. What plans haven't we made, longing for sense, for order? The bookseller's sudden reappearance one day under the laundromat awning. With glaucoma, he has had to sleep sitting up all these years between taking in his wares and putting them out again. Today is the best day to have rain soak the city, like the image on TV of a village swept away by a monsoon, a man clinging to the neck of his cow, while we watch, folding the clothes slowly. It's funny, right? No matter what drama goes on in the world, in Ukraine, in any place, we fold the clothes. What else to do? Here is a poem about a woman who came to all of Ali's fights, woman in the ringside seat. She came to all of Ali's fights, hoping one day to see him finally get knocked out. She tasted his sweat flying everywhere, heard his interview with the showman announcer, the anti-American oath he swore, his declaration of objection, his name change. Honestly, she had preferred Cassius, the artful dodge of clay, the malleable nature of it, the speed of his boots as he used the rope. But the conviction in those gloves, in the Muslim name, victory after victory, made her gasp, pay to see him defeated. And those awful heroic couplets he composed, she cursed the night he added her to one of his verses, butterfly, bee, the demise of all species, the pretty and the not so. Couldn't stand him. I'm looking, I'm looking for that poem. Oh, there we go. Resistance. Thanks again for having me in this space that feels almost sacred. It's incredible. Resistance. The workmen in my kitchen are tearing things apart. New cabinets, though I love the old country style ones. The scallop trim I painted 2 shades of blue. I hide out in the bedroom, the walls shaking as they pound and break wood that comes away with creaks and groans, nails human in their holding. Outside, it's a hot one. Protesters on the move. I feel compelled to mention them, their bravery. Only yesterday I came across a picture in the paper of myself and students I'd encouraged to march down a street in the village. It might have been for Mumia, but the headline's gone and I don't remember the cause exactly or what we were yelling. But I'm thinking now how nothing gives way without breakage, without some form of damage to the old. The claw hammer in the hands of the workman, the nail powerless as he approaches. The battle for dignity rages in the nights and days, the homeless joining the campaign, the retired like me hunkered down, taking notes, witnessing how there must be dissent and noise, the very floor coming up, the policeman's foot in mid-kick coming down. And I think that's enough for you guys tonight. Let's see, maybe there's one more. I'm doing what I yell at people for doing. I'm doing the same thing. Okay, it's called Remember. It's a poem I wrote actually as a goodbye to students, high school students, for graduation. Remember. If we meet again on some street corner or in a marketplace in some foreign country, when the bombs have stopped dropping and you balance a beautiful baby in one hand and test melons with the other, if we stand there in the hubbub, each staring and saying how much the other has changed or still looks the same, if I don't remember your name as I introduce you to someone who has befriended me and stand patiently waiting while we recall days when the world had gone crazy and you asked me who would save it. Remember, I said, you will, even if I leave, even if you never hear from me again, you'll find someone to tell your story, who will get word to the front that the war is over and the children can go back into the classroom now, who will find me wherever I am, in the mountains, by the sea, waiting and listening for the quiet that will let us think. And when we walk from each other, you by way of the oranges, me by the fish, my friend will look back and I'll remember your name. Thank you so much. Thank
We
you.
have one more round of applause for all 4 poets.
Maybe time for 2.
2 questions. I want to know if those post mathematicians survived the war.